Good morning, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. In today's update, U.S. Capitol Police say they have, quote, obtained intelligence that shows a possible plot to breach the Capitol today. An FBI report says a militia group discussed plans to take control of the Capitol and remove Democratic lawmakers. As a precaution, the entire Capitol complex is surrounded by razor wire fencing, and the National Guard is deploying 5,000 troops. And today is particularly important because March 4th was the original presidential inauguration day. Now, the recently authorized Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now being used at mass vaccination sites across the country. 53 million Americans have now received at least one COVID vaccine dose, but the White House warns now is not the time to let our guard down as case numbers rise again in some states. 11 states are loosening restrictions this week, including Texas, which is fully reopening and ending its mask mandate. And the UK's Prince Philip is recovering from a heart operation. Buckingham Palace says the 99-year-old had a successful procedure for a pre-existing heart condition. The palace adds that he's expected to stay in the hospital for several more days for rest and recuperation. Prince Philip has been in the hospital since mid-February. And now to the crisis at the border. Senior DHS officials say there is a, quote, significant surge of migrants crossing illegally into the U.S. ABC News has been on the ground along the Texas-Mexico border, seeing some apprehensions firsthand. Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman brings us a story of families seeking a better life in the United States and the overwhelmed Border Patrol agents trying to contain the surge.
The helicopter circled low, skimming the treetops. Border Patrol agents dove into the brush.
Helicopters flying low. There are a number of vans here to pick up a group of migrants that apparently smuggled across the border and is hunkered down inside this orchard somewhere.
It took officials about half an hour to find the 16 migrants they said were hiding in this orchard. And there, on the side of a highway hugging the Rio Grande, they were ordered to remove the few things they carried.
So what you're seeing is these migrants being told to take off their shoelaces. That's something that they have to do before they're taken into custody. No belts, no shoelaces.
More came filing out of the brush, the foliage from their hiding places clinging to their clothes. Border Patrol officers and police asked if they needed water. The new detainees weren't cuffed. They were just loaded up and driven out. It's a process that has become remarkably efficient because it has to be. Mexico border now experiencing what senior DHS officials tell ABC News is a significant surge of crossings. The Biden administration has so far not permitted the Border Patrol to grant interviews or ride-alongs with the media, but the border is so active right now, especially near McAllen, Texas, that simply following Border Patrol traffic can lead reporters to apprehensions. And it was near the hamlet of La Jolla, beneath the hulking wall, that we encountered this group, about 40 migrants, according to Border Patrol, with children in tow. And as we walked up right there, the entire family weeping.
These people are crying right now because they are afraid that they're going to be sent back to their country.
Mauricio and Marie Cruz and their children, Jesse and Danis, are seeking asylum in the U.S. They say it's been a 15-day journey. There was a train ride, cramped car rides, and a $5,000 fee to coyotes.
Por favor, they're saying, please don't send us back.
They showed us the neatly folded note pulled from that Ziploc, their lifeline, the phone number of a family member in Baltimore. The towering wall of steel pikes now acts as a giant catch basin for migrants crossing the Rio Grande onto U.S. soil, but who can get no farther north than the wall. Death has always been a hazard of this voyage, but over the past 2 years for asylum seekers, political purgatory on the Mexican side of the border has been another hazard. Crossing the border, we visited this encampment of asylum seekers in Matamoros, Mexico.
Beneath these tarps and behind this concertina wire are about 700 migrants. They are just some of the 25,000 migrants that have been waiting, some of them for up to 2 years, for their chance to have their cases heard in the U.S.
They were in this place because of the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy, ordering that instead of waiting for court hearings in the U.S., most asylum seekers would be forced to wait in Mexico. But then came COVID. Immigration courts closed, and that wait for families like Blanca's and Jonathan's seemed indefinite. Last month, a record ice storm slammed Texas and northern Mexico, and they froze in flimsy blankets, seeing ice form outside for the first time in their lives. They also revealed the frightful risk the couple took in mid-January, crossing illegally into the U.S. on the day Blanca gave birth to their son, Jonathan Jr., all so that their infant would be stamped with a lifelong designation, U.S. citizen. But within 3 days, they were expelled right back to Mexico. They waded through the cold and the thick heat of summer in a camp which hugs the Rio Grande, the U.S. on the other side, tantalizingly close. But the Biden administration has been quietly rolling back restrictions. Last Thursday, Jonathan and Blanca were able to cross into Brownsville, Texas, legally. Every day, that Matamoros encampment gets smaller. We watched as a human rights lawyer explained to dozens of asylum seekers how the process would go. And on Tuesday, we caught up with Jonathan again. He was staying at a motel in Brownsville. It was cramped, but they had beds and heat and food. He told us the news. They were going to fly to Boston to be with their family. What kept Jonathan and Blanca in Mexico is part of what Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas calls the broken U.S. immigration system.
It takes time to build out of the depths of cruelty that the administration before us established. What we are seeing now at the border is the immediate result of the dismantlement of the system and the time that it takes to rebuild it virtually from scratch.
Changes that were already visible in Brownsville's bus station. Officials here told us these folks were recently apprehended along the border and then released from Border Patrol custody with a promise that they would show up for immigration hearings. Now, and at the station, they were being processed, but first tested for COVID.
Since you've been here, on average, what is the percent positive of the people coming across from Mexico?
Let's say from the most that I have tested, like around 116, and from those, at least 30 are positive.
Wow, so you've had days where 30, almost like 25% of the people coming across are COVID positive?
Yes.
Wow, is that surprisingly high? Is that? Well, that's a high positivity rate.
It's a high.
Administration officials say they don't have room for all the migrants they've apprehended, especially with COVID social distancing requirements. The backlog growing with the enormous influx of unaccompanied minors. And we saw evidence of that back at that Border Patrol operation near McAllen, Texas. This young man saying he was from Honduras. DHS officials tell ABC News about 9,000 unaccompanied children and teens crossed into the U.S. just in the month of February, and now officials are asking the Biden administration to help them prepare 20,000 beds for minors crossing illegally, most of them from Central America. The administration says this means it has been forced to house these youth in temporary shelters because of COVID and the need to vet their sponsors. In some cases, those are the very same facilities created by the Trump administration. And to the migrants still heading north, as Mauricio and Marie Cruz had done, the administration asking for patience from all those.
We are not saying don't come. We are saying don't come now, because we will be able to deliver a safe and orderly process to them as quickly as possible.
Meantime, today was a momentous day for Blanca and Jonathan and their family. Their first time on a plane, headed to a place that, until this week, had sounded unimaginably distant, Boston, hoping that, like the baby in Blanca's arms, they too, one day, could call themselves American citizens. Matt Gutman, ABC News, McAllen, Texas.
Incredible to see what those families are going through. Matt Gutman, thank you for that. And a new study by California State University shows over the past year, attacks against Asian Americans have spiked nearly 115% in 16 of the most populated U.S. cities. 150. Now ABC News Live is taking a closer look at the events that have led to increased violence and activism within the Asian American Pacific Islander community. In a special called Stop the Hate, airing tonight, actors Olivia Munn and Daniel Day Kim are just two of the prominent figures now speaking out. Take a look.
Yeah, we're being a lot more vocal than our parents and grandparents. My grandmother and her 9 children, they all came here the day the war ended in Vietnam. And they didn't speak any English. And they all came here for a better life. And really wanted to be a part of the fabric of our country and add to it. And a big part of that was to just keep your head down and accept being a second-class citizen in your own country. We just want to survive and get through. And our generation, we were raised to speak up for people who need our help, to be American, cry out when there's an injustice. And when you look at our parents, our grandparents, they paved the roads for us. And now it's our turn to take them back to the front of those roads and walk them down those paths and say, like, look, you belong here. You're an American, and it's safe.
It is crucial to really understand how we have all contributed to the fabric of this country and how we progress as a country from here, because we are here. We're not going anywhere. And the demographic of the country is changing. So we must do our best to understand it as it truly is and not what we thought it was.
And our Juju Chang is co-anchoring that special. She joins me live now for more on this. Juju, good morning. Give us a preview of what we can expect to see in this special tonight.
Well, we see a lot of high-profile Asian Americans like Daniel Dae Kim, who frankly helped spark this new spotlight on anti-Asian American hate. And I think that it's what's fascinating, and the through line to all of it is that each of the people that we have tonight talk about it from a personal experience, from a lived experience of what it's like to feel other. And this rash of attacks against elderly Asian Americans in the Bay Area has galvanized the community. Daniel Dae Kim offered a reward, and a lot of attention was brought to bear. But what we began to realize, at least in the Asian American community, is that this has been going on throughout the pandemic. And that is what we're exploring tonight. What was it throughout the entire year that has seen this huge spike that you alluded to, Diane, in the intro, of attacks against Asian Americans? What is it that allows people to treat Asian Americans as other than less than fully American, as Olivia Munn eloquently said, as a second-class citizen? We're going to hear from Jeremy Lin tonight, who is an icon in the Asian American community. He's the NBA player who recently came out and said that he was referred to as coronavirus while on the court. And he said, yes, this is a reflection of what's happening now, but it's also a reflection of something that's happened throughout his career. That he's had racial slurs hurled at him from the sidelines throughout his career. And I think that's what we're paying attention to now, that with this recent rise, Diane, I have to say I've done a number of stories across my show Nightline and across ABC News on Good Morning America. And so many of my white friends who are dear friends of mine and very in tune with the news said to me, Juju, I had no idea this was going on. And I think, Diane, that reflects the sort of invisibility of the Asian American culture, the invisibility of Asian American pain, because what we may not report broadly is that Asian Americans have experienced disproportionate amounts of poverty and unemployment during this pandemic. In some communities, like the Filipino healthcare workers, they've suffered disproportionate rates of infection and death, but that doesn't get covered. And so we're shining a light on the slurs that have been activated by this pandemic.
And Juju, I know this is a project close to your heart. What was it like to put this together?
What was great is to see all of my friends throughout the news division. You know, you're watching ABC News Live, so the people who are in charge, Katie Dendos, Kat McKenzie, they just rallied an entire army. And it's not just people of color working on this special tonight. Our white fellow counterparts are just as passionate about telling these stories. And one of the things that we've showcased, for example, is a mashup of White House reporters going toe-to-toe with President Trump, starting with our Cecilia Vega, who asked him and was critical about the use of the phrase Wuhan virus or Kung flu, and why it was considered a weaponization of fear and anxiety of the pandemic against the Asian American community. We saw Weijia Zhang from CBS do the same thing at the White House. We saw Yamiche. And if you note, they're all women of color speaking up against words that could be inflicted. And in fact, what we saw in the rise in anti-Asian hate was that some of the perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, were using the same phraseology from the White House. We all know, Diane, that words matter. Like, I traveled to Michigan during the pandemic and interviewed the governor, right, Gretchen Whitmer, and she said every time the president used the phrase, that woman from Michigan, or accosted her lockdown measures, online hate and death threats against her spiked. They could correlate every time President Trump said. So it is undeniable that it's not what you say, because I've heard people say, well, the virus is from China. Why is that a slur? It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? I mean, we talk about the UK variant, but we don't see people going down and attacking people who are Brits, right? I mean, there is something about the otherization of Asians that we explore, the violence that has happened in Texas, in Pennsylvania, in New York, across the country, and from all walks of life. And that's what's fascinating about some of the history of anti-Asian hate that was just sort of brought to bear during the pandemic.
So, Juju, what do you hope people take away from this special when they see it tonight?
I think the idea that the Asian American community is very diverse in and of itself. There are dozens of countries with dozens of languages and cultures. Ironically, Diane, so many of the victims of this anti-Asian hate were not even Chinese, right? I mean, this is like Stop the Coronavirus. Like, half the people were, not even half, probably the vast majority weren't even Chinese, had never been to China, are born and raised in America. So I would say the one takeaway is Asian Americans are American. And I think that once we see each other and our fellow man in that way, that will help fight hate.
We sure will. Juju, doing your part. We appreciate it as always. Thank you, friend.
My friend Diane, thank you.
And you can catch the complete special, Stop the Hate, The Rise in Violence Against Asian Americans. That's tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on ABC News Live. And that does it for this ABC News Live update. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern with Terry Moran for The Breakdown. Stay safe.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.